What shall we talk about?
I am a dumbass. I've had access to Zero Space for the longest time and I didn't realize it. But I realize it now, so I want to talk a little about RTS games in general and then some impressions of the game. I'm also currently playing through Command & Conquer 3, so for the CNC fans, hold tight, that review is coming. Now let's start with the obvious. This is not going to be high-level gameplay takes on the competitive side of Zero Space, because frankly, I suck. And that's what makes me perfectly qualified to talk about this. I've grown up with Command & Conquer, Red Alert, StarCraft, Total Annihilation, Battlezone, Dawn of War. I am the guy with games like Dwarf on his wish list. So let me start with this. The competitive viability of any RTS means absolutely jack shit in comparison to what I believe the fundamental pillars of RTS are, and all the successful RTS games up until this point have had this as a spine to support them. First is world buy-in. This is the combination of the story, the world building, how the units work, the tenets of the faction, their politics, why they think the way they think,
aged to perfection,
why they prefer chemical warfare over explosives, all that good stuff that makes the player interested in the world at a fundamental level. Second is spectacle, and this is one that many modern RTS games really get wrong. Look at how Zerglings swarm and circle around enemy units in StarCraft 2. I mean, I don't really need to explain this, do I? It's the reason you only see RTS game trailers with max population caps fighting each other. And while it's not super important which method you use,
Sir, it's an honor to have you back.
the overall effect of spectacle is so crucial. Last but certainly not least is control. It's one of the reasons why Blizzard RTSs have been so popular. When you tell something to do something, it needs to do it straight away, and whatever that action is, it needs to do what it says on the tin. How many times have you played an RTS and you lose a unit thinking, I didn't tell it to go there? I'll throw a bone to creative modes as well. Everyone loves these and there's a ton of value, but again, why would someone use your platform to create something if there isn't already a thriving community to participate? So it's all secondary. Now, in my opinion, once you've got these pillars down, then you can think about balance, multiplayer, ranking, and whatnot. And the reason why is that multiplayer is one mode, and while it might be the largest source of income in the sense of people watching the game, it is still secondary to the bulk of people that are buying the game just to have fun. The let me build my army for 20 minutes and we'll meet in the middle Andes are the bulk of RTS enjoyers. So why am I saying all this? Well, when I was in the Stormgate Alpha, I couldn't talk about it publicly. I played the game for about 4 hours. I left a long Discord message in the feedback section and never touched it again because I knew they didn't address the fundamental pillars first and foremost, and I was right. Just goes to show that even ex-StarCraft 2 devs can totally lose sight of their core audience. There is a big problem with RTS discourse, and it's something akin to MMO discourse. When a genre is waning in popularity, the vocal representation of that genre are the wolves that killed the sheep and they still think they're sheep. What do I mean by that? Have you ever noticed that there is a tendency for MMO fanatics to chase open systems, open PvP, and higher skill floors? Well, that's because they've invested in learning the game, they've spent time, they want to be rewarded for their time and effort at the expense of the growing player base, because they falsely assume new people are just going to kindly accept their daily beatings, look at the mountain of catch-up, and come back the next day, because in their minds, that's how they did it.
新陳代謝の活発な脳で羨ましいよ。
They are no longer playing the game for the same reason a new player is, and when they hear a new player's perspective, they will knock it down as an experience, even though every metric is telling them they're wrong. So who are the people that are still interacting with RTS content? They're still logging in, they're still invested, because everyone beat the campaigns almost a decade ago. The only people left are the die-hard competitive multiplayer communities, and they are the ones posting, they are the ones that are giving the feedback, they are the ones that are signing up for the alphas predominantly, and the most fanatic of them are the most vocal. So guess what? It's really easy to make a bad RTS, and all you have to do to get into this situation is listen to your audience. Now hold up, because I'm a huge advocate for listening to your audience, but I'm also a huge advocate for balancing feedback with common sense and tempering it with precedence. So what has any of this to do with Zero Space? Well, the developers of Zero Space actually get it. And yes, a bunch of them are ex-StarCraft 2 pros. Shout out to anyone who remembers watching Scarlet play Zerg on Husky StarCraft YouTube videos, you know, before he deleted everything. Scarlet is actually in charge of balance as far as I'm aware, but there's a bunch of them working on this one, and as you can imagine, it plays a lot like a lower budget version of StarCraft 2. Now, I don't mean that as an insult, it's a game in alpha and it just objectively has a lower budget, but here's why I have so much faith in Zero Space. You can't play the campaign yet, but they have stated that there are RPG elements that will affect your alignment with different factions. Sounds good. We'll see how deep those systems are when we get them, but listen, Zero Space devs, listen very carefully. BioWare sucks right now, and this might be my last chance at romancing an Asari, so you know what to do, okay? Okay, but in all seriousness, I do really hope that they are able to weave in some of the more personal elements in storytelling. It's often one of the things that gets easily lost with the scale of the gameplay. Moving on, there's already a Horde survival mode with day and night cycles. There's a Galactic War, which is a faction-based galaxy control mode that allows you to play a bunch of co-op scenarios. They need more scenarios and a rotating roster, but that's beside the point. This is a brilliant way for your single-player Andes to engage with the rest of the player base in a way that is meaningful. And after that, you have your typical versus mode custom games, which include 2v2 and 2v AI. So even now, as an alpha, there are two very compelling ways to dip your toes in. Get a feel for the mechanics organically before you decide to be brave and jump into PvP. And even if you decide to never do PvP, you are still getting value out of the game. That's how I know Zero Space have the right direction, but it doesn't mean anything if the world isn't interesting. For the actual plot and the story going on here, it's a wait and see situation, but essentially your humans are called the Protectorate. So if you're boring, pick that one. You have the Grell, which is what happens when a Hydralisk has its way with an attractive Bulbasaur in a locker room. Replace the creep with grass and it's the same thing. And then you have Legion, and I know that you're expecting Protoss, but they are actually Chaos Cultists from Dawn of War. And that is a distinction worth noting, by the way. While there is obvious StarCraft influence here, there is also a lot of Dawn of War DNA here too. The RTS genre has always struggled with early game, where it can be a little boring at the start, and then there's a tendency to want to sit back and work on economy, and then you move out when you feel you have the upper hand. So many developers have tried to get players to engage with each other right from the start, and in my opinion, Dawn of War did it best. You didn't use workers to collect anything, you used your combat units to capture points across the map, and you had your hero unit very early game, so naturally, okay, well, their hero unit can only be in one place at once, and my hero can be anything that they have that isn't a hero unit. So all I have to do is attack where their hero isn't, and if I get caught up, hey, you've got a lot of health, you can get away. That's a very organic flow. You don't have to be smart, you don't have to study timings or anything, you just go out and see what you can do while your economy builds up. Zero Space also has heroes. There's generally one unique hero per faction with an alternate hero depending on which mercenary force you pair up with, more on that later. Now when RTS games make free hero units, they have a tendency of making them a little too important. And I think these ones are right in the Goldilocks zone. They will kill a bunch of basic infantry or offer valuable utility, but they are not going to carry the game. You will lose if you depend on them too heavily. The other thing that really impressed me was how they streamlined the most boring elements of RTS without simplifying the game into banality. Remember all the RTS games where a unit has a special ability and you need to put them in a different command group because you can't activate the ability if you have mixed unit selections? Fuck off. Now you can select your death ball and all the abilities of the units in the death ball are hotkeyed for you. Remember when you set your rally point to a unit and you would need to catch the units and travel to add them to the command group? Fuck off. If that unit is in a command group, the built units are automatically part of that command group. Remember moving your workers into position so they could build or spawn a building for you and they got stuck at a ramp so the building never built? Fuck off. There are no worker units. I mean, there are, but it's the equivalent of 5 units for collecting Vespene gas and they do it automatically. That's all they do. Your primary resource is just straight up building your command center in the mineral deposits and it just collects the minerals passively, much like Total Annihilation. So yes, this simplifies the economy in terms of clicks and mental space, but it does not diminish the importance of having to think about economy from a macro perspective. When do I expand? Can I hold this mineral field? Can I take their minerals? Stuff that players actually care about. Now, I mentioned mercenaries before. You can think of these as mini factions that you can take alongside you to spice up the experience by both giving you the option of a different hero and usually about 8 supporting units that can be called in on a timer. But they also add unique talents. Now, talents are basically your command powers. These are generally faction-specific command powers. I'm generally not a fan of command powers. Talents generally range from things like time-limited efficiency powers all the way to calling a giant nuclear mech that explodes when it dies. Spectacle achieved. But yeah, talents are kind of earned by holding the middle points, so nuclear robots are not for pussies. We're not going to talk about research and upgrade paths. They're pretty similar to StarCraft 2. Some of them are just stats, some of them really complete a unit into a specialization, but it's pretty stock standard. Other than some of the options also lock out other options. So I'm looking at the units. I'm looking at the fact that I can build a spaceship the size of a building, as in it's actually in the building menu. And after I finish building it, I can choose what turret to put on it. I am looking at the fact that I can create a missile barrage so intense it invalidates all existence in 100 square meters. You see this ugly flying cicada? Well, I can evolve it into an ugly flying cicada with pretty wings. Now multiply this with the possibility of hero abilities and mercenaries. Zero Space is cool. Very simply, these races, factions, the units, they are cool. The way they work is cool, the potential for the world buy-in is amazing, and yes, it's never going to have the benefit of being foundational like StarCraft was, it's never going to benefit from the wealth of artistic talent and resources Blizzard has, but all the parts that matter the most are right. It plays well, the attention to detail is high where it matters. It's obvious that a lot of love and effort is going into it. And I think it's easy for people to have a surface level opinion of it being a StarCraft derivative. That's not what I see. I see people that have been playing RTS games for a long time, they love RTS games, and they want to take all the best experiences they ever had while playing them and roll them into a single package. Now, will Zero Space become a success? It's impossible to say, who knows? I think it's very good so far as an alpha, and I really look forward to seeing it grow into a full release. But hey, that's just one loser's opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
While their diplomats talk of finding a peaceful solution, it appears GDI's appetite for the blood of innocents continues to grow.